Hello, and please feel welcome to talk about men. I've had to change a lot of details of the next story just to make sure that it's anonymous. I got back into my paganism and went along to a group. Leonard was giving a talk to promote his latest book. He was the head of a spiritual organisation, L'Ange des Liaisons Dangereuses. We'll call them LAD for short. Even though he was in his late 40s, because he was the head of the LAD, he called himself the alpha male. He also claimed to be the face of God on earth today, and that the government would eventually kidnap him to research his magical powers. He asked for my phone number to keep me in touch with future events. I was very flattered. We met up a few times at mine, and then I went over to Paris to stay at his. He lives in an abandoned warehouse. In the main room as I went in were two twins. They seemed nice enough until you looked down at their hands and noticed that they both had scissors for hands. We had to climb a ladder to get to his bedroom. Instead of curtains, they had pieces of colourful silk that billowed in the wind. All around his bedroom were pictures of his ex-girlfriend, Ophelie, who had dumped him. He had enjoyed having sex on drugs with her. One night I stayed, and he claimed it was depressing because we didn't have sex. I was scared of taking acid, so I thought I should do it for my spiritual development. One time when we were on acid, he made it clear what he wanted, though he didn't physically make a move. He was after sex on acid. Acid isn't an aphrodisiac for most people. I was terrified and curled up into the fetal position, visualising symbols of protection all around me. A trip lasts several hours, so it was a really unpleasant experience. Another time we met at a mutual friend's in Florence. Leonard says, "Oh, when are we going to have sex?" I said, "When I want to, and not before." This was really assertive for me. He said, "I should hope so." So it was not only expected that I'd have sex on demand, but also that I would want it at all times. Eventually he lay there and masturbated himself in front of me. Then he left, calling me an allumeuse to his friend, a tease, and stormed off home. This was in the late 90s, so to me it seemed old-fashioned even then to call someone a tease. I was really upset as I really liked him. A few years later, we met up again. We were on the same page sexually this time. I'd learned to have multiple orgasms, so his ability to keep going for a long time due to magical techniques really came in handy. I learned that the twins had trashed the warehouse where they lived and all Leonard's belongings. Also that other people had left drug paraphernalia all over the warehouse. Leonard had managed to move into his own place. At one point, he said something about crime and drugs. I was joking, really, but I coyly said, "Oh, but I wouldn't know anything about that." He said, "Innocence is unattractive after a certain age," which is a bit sort of dodgy sounding if you think of it. And also, it's okay to be innocent of things that aren't seen as good. We discussed having sex without a condom. He had a disease, but he said the disease wasn't likely to be transmitted through sex, so I agreed to it. Years later, I learned Ophelie had dumped him because he gave her the disease. If someone has sex on drugs, this is more likely than with normal sex, as people aren't quite as aware of what they're doing, can get carried away or get rougher than normal and so on. They wouldn't have used needles, but maybe if they shared a straw for cocaine, that can also be a risk. There are other possibilities, but I can't go into it as it would be outing. I was uncomfortable in the environment of the squat. If you're uncomfortable in an environment, leave. Your gut feeling is important. It turned out that the people there were violent. And there's nothing wrong when it comes to being innocent of things that are considered dodgy. Also, men who bully or strop for sex should be binned. And any verbal abuse is another reason to get rid of them. I believe there was a culture of sexual entitlement in the lad. His strange beliefs about his own superiority were narcissism or even some sort of psychosis brought on by drugs. If you notice anything like this, you shouldn't see the man again. Thank you for listening to me talk about men. Please like, share and subscribe. And if you have a story to tell, you can email on the link in the description.